Today on MuscleCar, we start a brand new project that's dedicated to one of the most iconic muscle cars ever built. We've got the power plant. Now we need a car. It's what to look for in a project vehicle and how to make it authentic, because we're going from NOPO to COPO.
Hey y'all, we've been making a lot of progress on our 69 O's resto mod, with the tubs in place and the firewall fabbed up, not to mention the rust in the doors repaired. But we're gonna let it hang out for a minute, because we've got to get some parts headed this way, and we still got a whole lot more work to do. We could tinker on the Dodge for a bit, but we've had an opportunity come up that we couldn't quite pass on. For a few of you out there, it may raise your eyebrow, but for those of you who don't know what we've got here, let me let you in on it. This is an all-aluminum 427 Chevrolet ZL1 crate engine, which we got from Chevrolet Performance. The original versions of these engines were only produced in 1969, and since then, they've achieved legendary status. Back then, this was the biggest, baddest Chevrolet setup that you could get. With the W-Series big blocks that were introduced in the late 50s and early 60s, GM discovered that the public had a real appetite for big displacement engines, such as the legendary 409, and its drag racing counterpart, the 427 cubic inch Z11. The next generation of Chevy big blocks, dubbed the Mark IV series, is a spin-off of the old W blocks, with the blocks now being milled at the conventional 90 degrees and the chamber and valve placement being altered to improve performance at higher RPM. That valve placement is where the old nickname came from, the porcupine. In 1966, the Mark IV version of the 427 was introduced, and it's still considered one of Chevrolet's most successful and versatile engines. They were available in a variety of setups, from smooth idling grocery getters to racy solid lifter power plants. In 1969, the ZL1 version of the 427 was produced with the inclusion of aluminum open chambered heads and a slightly hotter camshaft. The ZL1 also featured an aluminum block, which dropped the weight from 687 pounds to 575 pounds, about as light as a small block Chevy, all the while producing a claimed power level near 500 horse. And the ZL1 required 103 octane due to a compression ratio of 12:1. If you combine all that with the price tag of just this engine option, which was over $4,000, there wasn't a whole lot of ZL1s ever produced, because quite frankly, that one engine option was higher than the car it was going in. On the Corvette, the ZL1 was actually a factory option, but there's another model that was never really intended to have these engines. Chances are, if you've seen this show before, you've heard the term COPO. COPO stands for Central Office Production Order, as opposed to an RPO, regular production order. The most famous COPOs are the rare 69 Camaro 9560 production order units with the ZL1 engine. Overall, only 69 of these cars were ever produced, with the first 50 being ordered by a single dealer named Fred Gibb, a Chevrolet dealer and drag racing enthusiast in La Harpe, Illinois. These first 50 were all bare bones, all business, street legal race cars. It took some pretty deep pockets in '69 to justify the purchase of one of these bad boys. Once other dealers found out that you could get this option, another additional 19 cars were produced, pushing the grand total to 69 1969 Camaros with the ZL1 option, and some of these cars are lost forever. Chevrolet Performance knew that this legendary power plant was close to the hearts of many muscle car enthusiasts, and in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Big-Block Chevy, they took and refurbished the original tooling to produce the ZL1 engine, and created this, a limited series of 427 crate ZL1s. Starting with the aluminum block, employing 4-bolt mains, a forged steel crank, rods, and forged aluminum pistons, this setup offers a final 9.5:1 compression ratio, making it pump gas friendly. It also includes a high-performance hydraulic roller cam, aluminum roller rockers, aluminum oval port heads, and a matching aluminum oval port high flow intake. Claiming 430 horsepower, that's likely a fair underestimate of this engine's potential. Each of them is numbered, and we must be pretty cool. Why, you ask? Because we actually got number 426 out of 427. This engine also comes with some other goodies I want to show you. Check this out. This is a Holley 770 CFM carburetor. It's a similar representation to what that engine would have came with back in '69. It's a 4-barrel vacuum secondary design that goes hand in hand with the airflow that engine's capable of. In addition, this engine also comes with a certificate of authenticity. Well, it's more like a steel plate of authenticity. But it includes the production number of this engine, the engine specs, and a set of badges that are specific to this series that you might choose to use on a vehicle that you install it into. It also comes with a leather jacket with the engine series stitched on it. Now, if you're a big-time Chevrolet man, all this stuff has to be pretty close to the top of the mountain for you. So this is where we're at. We've got this big bad big block and we know what we want to drop it into, but it kind of creates a problem because we don't have a car. So I guess we better start digging around. That way we can build our own COPO inspired 69 Camaro.
Now that you know what we have in mind, it's time to go find a car and then get it ready for glory. What does it take to make a car COPO-like? Stick around and find out.
Okay guys, we've been looking at several different vehicles for our next project, a tribute to the ZL1 COPO Camaro. Some of the rides that we've been looking at could be turned into a nice car, while the others, let's just say they take a lot of work to get there. This car, for example, is a textbook reflection of what's commonly referred to as a basket case. It's a project that's already been started by someone else, and buying a car like this can often save you a good deal of cash. But beware, oftentimes the people who are selling these cars have a really good reason to do so. It could be that the car is way rougher than they thought, or it's missing really important and expensive pieces. After beating the bushes for a bit, we finally found us a candidate. We wanted to start with a driver, not a car that needed a whole lot of sheet metal work thrown at it, or a car that was missing tons of parts that we'd have to search high and low to find those hard to find pieces. You gotta keep in mind though, whenever you're looking at drivers, all that can save you some time, but it does cost you. I don't know about you, but that's American. This car is a lot more along the lines of what we're looking for with this particular project. This small block option isn't anything to write home about, but it's a darn nice car from the looks of it. We know that the engine is going away when it's all said and done, so it's really more important to check out the integrity of the rest of the car.
Well, I'll show you this book. Shows you the original window sticker.
The fact that he has all the paperwork on the car is a great thing. It can tell you the history of the car in ways that nothing else can. Where it's been, who's owned it, and how well they took care of it.
Here, take it for a ride.
Thanks, man. Well, I'm taking the Camaro for my first little ride, and it definitely feels like a muscle car. The steering on it is a little stiff. That's because it's non-power. The brakes on it, all drum, non-power also. So when you're getting the brakes, you have to decide, you're going left, you're going right. Well, motor in it, this thing's got the 307, which isn't really nothing to look at much because it was Chevrolet's idea of performance with economy. And well, he really didn't hit neither one of them. See, let me show you. Did you notice I even just got on it then? Oh yeah. Oh, no, not at all. Oh geez. Private property. Better turn around. At least it still has the original stock bumpers and they're in good shape so they can be re-chromed. And it's got a small amount of rust in the rear quarters, which can be repaired. And when you get in a car like this one, with this kind of age, well, you better expect that kind of stuff. All this stuff plays a factor whenever you're talking money on these. But at least with this car, it's got all the parts, and really, it's exactly what we need. So, I think we're gonna go ahead and take this one.
Still ahead, find out why the paperwork on your project can be one of the most important parts. And it's chrome away time. What pieces did COPOs have and what's going away?
Well guys, as you saw, Tommy spent a lot of time and energy rolling around the country down here to find us a 69 for a COPO tribute car. He found us a jewel. It's in really good shape. It's a baseline car. which means nobody's going to be upset if we tear apart a Z28 or something like that. But let's see what we've got to get started and get rolling. Although the later COPO cars were offered with the factory-style GM Rally wheels, we're going to go for the more recognizable COPO look in the plain steel, a little bit cleaner and even meaner muscle car look. When it comes to some of the plastic pieces on this car, which will include interior pieces on the dash as well as the grille out front, depending on what we find for damage and what's available, we'll make the decision of whether to replace or repair that item. Another area of the car, which is definitely going to get some of our attention, is the body trim work and bright pieces. The COPO cars came mostly as a baseline body without the wheel opening moldings, the trim on the louvers on the quarters, as well as the drip rails and the engine badges up front, which on this car are the 307s. Definitely going to go. But one piece we don't have to wait to get rid of is this right here. It is gone and out of here. This jewel that Tommy found us has got a really, really good body. The only problem area we found that's going to be major for us is like most cars of this age. Somebody's already repaired the rear quarters at least one time. We get to do them again. The seats are a little worse for wear, so we're probably going to have to do something about that. But the basic look of the interior will stay the same. Probably the biggest change you're going to see in the interior that we're going to make is going to be in the dash and the instrument panel. We're going to be going with a taller speedometer. And definitely without any hesitation, in the other hole, you're going to see a tachometer so we can keep an eye on what that motor's doing. Okay guys, we've got one major area left. We're going to show you some of the changes and upgrades we're going to make to the Camaro. One is this 10-bolt rear axle. Plenty strong enough for the 307 we're taking out, but nowhere near strong enough for the 427. We're going to replace it with a GM 12-bolt and multi-leaf suspension system. We'll go up through and make any necessary repairs we need to make to the sheet metal, hopefully not too many. But we are going to have to change the tunnel to make a variance in it for the 4-speed Muncie we're going to put in when we get rid of the automatic. Then we'll move up and we're going to get rid of these old drum brakes. We're going to use stock style OEM GM discs. Not a major improvement, but trying to stay with the OEM theme. It's definitely going to be an upgrade for stopping that big motor. We've shown you most of the major areas and some of the major changes and upgrades we're going to make to the car. Not going to be all of them though. There's going to be many surprises along the way, hopefully not too many we weren't anticipating, but the only way we're going to get this project started is get her on the ground and do it. So let's go.
Are you a fan of literature? Well, the paperwork that you have on your car could increase its value significantly.
Like we mentioned earlier, one of the biggest differences between the 69 ZL1 COPO Camaros and a standard Camaro like we have here is they were a lot more stripped down. They had a lot less chrome and a lot less shiny bits. Since we're going to repaint the car and have to take all this stuff off anyway, let's go ahead and get started.
These bumperettes are going to go away in the long run because the typical COPO didn't include them. But that sure doesn't mean someone else can't use them. So a little bit of care can get you some cash back towards your next project. We are going to be reusing the chin spoiler since it's a part of the COPO look, but the fender trim is going to be a no-no.
Even though we're not going to use them, I'm going to give you guys a little tip about the stock hubcaps and trim rings. If you've noticed, you see a lot of the old GM rings on the Chevelles and Camaros that have small dents around them. That's because people leave them on the car when they go to take the hubcaps off and push against the edge of them. Take the outer trim ring off first so you're not laying on it and keep it good looking.
The rocker trim gets to stay since it came on the COPOs, but like the front, the rear bumperettes are destined to wind up on someone else's car. Drip rail moldings can be a real pain to remove. Sometimes you can save them, but sometimes you can't.
Well, you guys that have done this before know that I cheated a little and gotten on the inside of the car and removed some panels. But getting these louvers off the rear quarters means we're just about done with the outside trim.
When we went to go pick up our old Camaro, we talked a little bit about our little white book here. You may be wondering, well, what's exactly in it? It's the story of where and what our Camaro actually is. One of the things that came in the book is the original vehicle invoice. Now this thing will tell you what exactly the car costs new and what options it came with. It can let you in on a few other things like what dealership it came from and who originally bought it. And it even tells you what they traded in on it, a '63 old Scoop. That's kind of neat. Another cool little piece of information that came along with our car is this tiny piece of metal. It's called a protecto plate. It was originally issued by the factories and the dealers used it whenever it came to warranty issues. This may seem a little primitive, but this was a technology that they had back then. Nowadays, it's all computerized. They just scan your VIN and it lets them know all your information. One thing I get a kick out of is these old sales brochures. And you can pick these up normally at your local swap meets, and the more popular cars, they're reproducing them. Other than the cheesy photos and the people driving the cars and their facial expressions, well, it makes me chuckle. But the images hold a lot of information. If you were doing an original restoration, these are the original cars back in the day. Now, looking at the internet, you're not real sure if the cars have been altered by the images or however. Looking at these, they're dead on. Doesn't get any better than this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited about this build. Having the honor to put together something as iconic as a COPO, well, that's a joy all to itself. You all be sure to stick around and go for that ride with us.
If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
Go over to PowerBlockTV.com.
Today on MuscleCar, learn how to adapt a small block Chevy to receive a pavement-pounding aluminum monster as we plug our ZL1 427 into our COPO Tribute Camaro.
hey folks, we're getting ready to start stage 2 of our 69 Camaro NOPO to COPO build. If you remember, we're going to take the small block out of this car that Tommy found for us and transform it into a tribute to one of the most iconic muscle cars ever built. We partnered up with Chevrolet Performance to do something a little extra special with this anniversary edition ZL1 427 Big Block. This is a recreation of the fabled 1969 ZL1 engine that was found in a mere 69 special ordered Camaros from that year. With an aluminum block and heads, along with 4-bolt mains, a forged steel crank, rods, and forged aluminum pistons, you can expect easily to see power in the mid-400s on pump gas, and maybe even a bit more than that, all with an incredibly iconic engine sitting under the hood.
Pretty much the only thing that we've done is knock off some of the chrome and take off a few of the frills that this Camaro came with, which isn't all that bad of a deal because most of the COPO Camaros were low option cars. They didn't really come with all those creature comforts.
But of course, since we're going to wedge this big aluminum monster into that car, we're going to need to make a little room. The original 307 that came out of there will probably find a home being rebuilt in one of the other shows, but now it needs to come out of that car. In addition to that, we've got to unload the Power Glide transmission that came behind the small block. Now, we borrowed this Muncie transmission case for mock-up to see how things are going to fit under the car, but we're working on getting a Rock Crusher 4-speed of our own because that's what the COPO would have came with.
Now you guys may be wondering why we're draining some of the fluids. The reason being is once you pull this dry shaft and you go to pull all this stuff out, all that stuff is going to wind up on the floor. So just take a few extra minutes, save you some cleanup time.
Hold on. Okay. Okay.
Ah, yucky. Ah, yucky.
Let me guess, all the water that came in the back just went out the front.
It like runs downhill.
There's that mess we were talking about. Show them the pretty full hood. Whoa, where are we going? I've already busted off one of the spark plugs, but I'm not too worried about it because they're old plugs in an old motor that were taken out. But I like to leave them in the motor because you never know. It's going to sit in the garage, sit in the shed, sit outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull the header back and I'm going to knock the porcelain off, which will make it easier for me to get the header out, lift the motor up out of the car. Even if you leave the broken plugs in the motor, it keeps it sealed up, keeps the weather out of it. And therefore, if you're lucky, it won't end up tied up.
Looks like I got the easy side. After I unbolted the header, it came up through the top. Next is to clear out the stuff on the top of the motor that ties it to the car, starting with the heater hoses, radiator hoses, and the cooling system. This little old 2-barrel is going to go away too. And for no more real estate than this little thing takes up, it sure does have a ton of lines, vacuum hoses, and components latched onto it. Once everything is out of the way, we can bring in the hoist and get to jacking.
lid back up a little more.
Well, alrighty, we've got our engine pulled out of our soon-to-be COPO Camaro along with the transmission that was bolted up to it. Once we swap some motor mounts around, that aluminum ZL1 engine will drop right in where it needs to go. We've also got us a mock-up Muncie that we're going to use to make sure everything's exactly where it needs to be.
But there's going to have to be some floor pan repair and modification done while we're at it. The driver's side floor in this car is going to have to be completely replaced and the transmission tunnel modified slightly to go from an automatic to a stick shift.
With the floor modifications that have to be done, we want to get the seats out of the way so we can work unhindered. The carpet's got to go too, and we're planning to order some brand new that we can install back in there a little later on.
All right, I know what you guys were thinking for just a second there, but believe me, I'm not going to hook up this old equipment to our new Jewel. This is the stuff we promised you earlier, which is going to be for the mock-up. What we're going to do is bolt all this together and just set it in the car on its motor mounts and transmission mount, because what we need to do once we get this thing down in there is make sure we have enough clearance for the secondary items, such as pulleys, fan to radiator clearance, big one being exhaust manifolds, which is always a problem with steering mechanism, and just to make sure, even though we're going from a small block Chevy to a big block Chevy, that everything will still fit. After I get them all in, when I go to snug them up, what I'll do is I'll go from side to side, back and forth to make sure it tightens up flat against the motor and doesn't end up cocked in any way, shape, or form. Come on down, Tom. I'm on the pinch weld on the firewall. Take her up just a tad. There we go. Okay, time out. My concern is this HEI distributor. I'd hate to damage any of it.
We're going to have to lose that wiper motor for right now or drop a valve cover off because it's touching.
Push down on the nose and push in. Kind of like that. Nowadays, modern transmissions have the linkage and the adjustment for it inside the case. But old school transmissions like Muncie's had them mounted on the outside in conjunction with the shifter. When it comes to muscle cars, there are a few things that are more iconic than the white 4-speed shifter knob. Just take a look at our logo. And one of the biggest icons in the business is still around making some of the best shifters today. This Hurst 4-speed shifter that we got from Classic Industries comes with fully adjustable gear stops which limit the throw on the shifter itself, therefore eliminating the potential for damage inside the transmission. The linkage kit, also from Classic Industries, is a direct bolt-on from the shifter to the transmission, making our job very easy.
With the bottom half of the shifter installed, we'll use it as a guide for where to place the hole. Then we'll pull it off to keep it safe, and with the hole saw, we'll make the initial cut. After the shifter gets reinstalled with the top half on it, the linkage can be hooked up as well. Then the retainer can be removed so that it will shift. Now we can keep shifting the tranny and cut out the metal that prevents it from moving all the way through the gears. Once we're satisfied that it moves like it should, we'll call it good.
Everything's working.
Today on MuscleCar, everybody knows that putting fire-breathing, pavement-pounding power down into a rear end that's built for grocery retrieval is a recipe for a phone call to a tow truck. Today, we show you how to build your own beefy GM 12-volt for a fraction of the cost of buying one. Then a cool trick to install coil springs.
Hey folks, glad to see you in the shop with us today. We've been chipping away at our '69 Camaro COPO tribute car, and before you know it, we'll be ready to drop in that Chevrolet Performance ZL1 engine. We've partnered up with Chevrolet Performance to pay homage to an iconic piece of American muscle, the '69 ZL1 427 Camaro, of which only 69 were ever made. Our Camaro will get this number 426 out of 427 ZL1 Anniversary Big Block as a power plant. And we're building the rest of the car around it to be as close as we can get to the original COPO. You can see we've got a good bit accomplished on our 69 Camaro. Pretty much from the firewall forward, it's all been disassembled. We're gonna reuse a good bit of that because it's the same stuff that a COPO would have originally had on it. But that's enough about all that. We'll get on it a little later on. We also finished up patching up on the quarter panels where some rust had started to take a hold, in addition to getting the floor pan squared away. The rear end that's tied into this Chevy is the small 10-bolt setup, which is perfectly fine for the 307 that this car has always been running. But the GM big power cars of the day were running a 12-bolt setup that was more capable of handling the abuse. So to keep our Camaro on the right track, we need to install a 12-bolt. The problem is those things can go for up to $2 grand just for an empty housing. I've seen it at the swap meets, but I believe I can beat all that. Go from brake drum to brake drum with upgraded parts for less cash. So this is my idea, is to take a 12-bolt rear out of an Impala, chop it down, narrow it up so it's the same width as the one for the Camaro. That way we'll have us a stronger unit when we're all said and done, and it'll be easier on your wallet too. These lug nuts haven't been off in who knows how long, so a little Royal Purple Max film will go a long way in getting them off the studs. The next rusty old part that's stuck on the rear is the brake drums. Sometimes you can save them. That's not looking like it's going to be the case here though. Well, we're fixing to try something that normally you don't really do. Sometimes you got to. We're going to try to split this brake drum to release that pressure in there. We'll have to sacrifice that old brake drum, but I don't think it's any good nohow. Now you can see it, all the pitting and garbage and stuff down here that's fell out of that drum. The chances are that drum was way too rusty to even fool with. So yeah, we did destroy it, but it was already a piece of scrap iron before we got started. Whew, I'm out of shape. Yeah, see what I mean? Now sometimes if you can't get the brake drums off, it's actually corrosion built up around this stub on the axle shaft. You can scrape this stuff off. I've had to file it off, make it a little easier to get them things out. Definitely can hurt, but instead of working with this thing trying to save all this stuff, we're not going to use it anyways, so I'm just going to bust it off like I did the other side. See, as I'm pushing this brake drum off, you can see this is actually holding itself in. That's what I was talking about. Now sometimes removing brake cables, they can be quite a chore because you got to push this little finger down, that little finger down, and there's another one back off in there. Cool little trick to use is a wrench. All you got to do is slide it on there, tap it down, that compresses those fingers. Pick it, cable, back out. Now we don't get to use the torch a whole lot here in the shop, but it's one of those type of tools that definitely has its uses. Now using the torch, there's actually a kind of a technique that I like to use whenever cutting off brackets. What you want to do is to pay attention to the flame coming out of the tip and angle it so that you're just cutting across the weld that attaches the bracket to the rear. If you try to turn it, it can actually dig into the tube and then you have to go back and grind and weld and fix all that to make it look like something. So just pay attention to what's going on. Another thing you want to keep in mind if you're cutting pieces off and they're going to fall, make sure you pay attention to where your hose is at because you don't want this to fall and chop it in two.
Chopping up a rear end housing can be intimidating. Next, we've got a great little piece of engineering that makes it super simple to make this affordable modification.
Hey Hey guys, I'm glad you made it back from the break. While you were gone, I went ahead and removed the axle shafts and the backing plates from our 12 bolt and the ones out of our 10 bolt. I wanted to show you the difference in the size of them so you can kind of see what the strength difference of the two is. Now this little greasy one, it's the factory 28 spline that came out of the Camaro. This 30 spline, you can definitely see why they would have put that in the higher horsepower cars. If you look down here to where the bearing actually runs out toward the wheels, it's a lot easier to see the difference in the size of the two. But that's no problem at all because we got this Moser engineering axle from Classic Industries. It's the correct spline, it's the correct length to fit our 69 Camaro, and it's a lot stronger than this factory setup. A weak point of this traditional unit is right here. A C-clip actually slides in to keep the axle from sliding out of the housing. Now if you start putting this type of setup under some heavy lateral movement, they have been known to break. Also, if you're drag racing some and you twist an axle out, the shaft is going to run out from under the car and you're fixing to go for one heck of a ride. The really neat part of this Moser setup is right here. This big bearing and axle housing end allow us to eliminate the C-clip altogether. In addition to letting us narrow the housing easily without having to deal with a whole bunch of just extra fab work. This prefab piece is the part that allows you to do this at home. It's not all that bad. Let me show you how to do it. Let's find out how wide the Impala rear is. That was 58 3/8. Our original Camaro housing is 54 3/8, so we've got to shorten it about 2 inches per side. That doesn't mean you can just chop off 2 inches on each side because you've got to account for this thing, the axle flange end. If you just cut the 2 inches and welded this back on, it'd put you at almost exactly where we started. That's 2 3/8, so we'll just add that to the 2 inches on each side, chop it off, we'll be ready to go. All right, we got a mark 4 3/8. Then I'm gonna use a handy little old hose clamp. These things work really nice for keeping your nice straight edge. Now you may have to wiggle it around a little bit to get it exactly where you want it, but that's the beauty of that clamp, it's easy to move. Make sure it's tight, so it don't wiggle around on you. Now I'm using a reciprocating saw because a lot of you guys at home would have something like this. Now you could use a cutoff wheel, but you don't want to use a torch because if you start doing that, you'd have to come back and dress all that up with a grinder. So we'll see how this works. Now we need to level the other axle in, that way we know how to clock the other side. The reason we do that is that way we can match the left and the right sides to make sure that the brakes are in the proper location. With our mark made, the next thing we're going to do is to bevel this axle tube a lot like this axle in. That way it ensures a good solid weld. Next thing we're going to do is slide the axle shaft in and go ahead and spline it into the carrier. That way we'll use the axle shaft to help locate this axle in. You can see that it's got up and down and front to rear type movement on it, and you want it to be in the happy medium of all four. That way the bearings don't have preload already on them. Now with that tacked into place, if you slide the axle out, you want it to have pretty much no binding at all. You can see that we're pretty much right there at it. Now it's time to burn it in.
Coming up, Tommy shows us a downhole method for setting your pinion angle and bracket placement.
Hey guys, we're on the downhill slide of building our 12 bolt for our Camaro project. We've got the axle tubes narrowed down and the axle ends welded up. We're ready to move on to putting the leaf spring perches on that we got from Classic Industries. Now we went ahead and removed the old rear out from under our Camaro because it's got some information that's a whole lot easier to copy sitting out here on the table. Now you may be noticing that there's a little bit of difference between the two. That's because of the original one that came out from under our Camaro is thinner because it came with the mono leaf or single leaf spring. Where the COPOs, they had a multi-leaf pack. That's the reason why they're thicker. Now my old 2x4s here may look a little primitive, but hey, it works because what we've got to do is clock these things correctly onto the rear by measuring the pinion angle. First thing you need to do is pick up the housing, set the perch up under it. Now we need to measure from where the backing plate goes on to the leaf spring perch and then duplicate that on the other rear. Shoot, we hit it dead on. We're almost ready to set the pinion angle, but first we need to do a little prep work to ensure a good solid weld. So we need to mark this thing, take it back apart, do a little grinding, and then we'll be just about ready to burn some wire. The reason you do this is so that you're not welding over top of rust, because welding and rust just don't play well together. So there's no reason to put your life in the hands of a nasty rusty weld. Once it's ground down, put your brackets back on, double check the measurements, and call it good. All right, we're ready to set the pinion angle. First, I'm gonna measure the angle of the 10 bolt so we know exactly where we need to be. Next, we're gonna put that measurement over here on top of our new one. You wanna do that way, make sure you don't have any drive shaft or oiling issues on the inside of the case. Once your angle is set, you can tack the brackets in place, triple check your placement, and then burn them in. I find it a lot better to flip the housing over so you can get to the work surface easily. Now, whenever you're working with the backing plates on these 12 bolts, they got a couple different patterns, and this is the difference in the two. They've got one that's called the truck pattern, which the upper and lower holes are the same width, where on the car pattern, the upper holes are wider than the bottom two are. I'm gonna use a couple of bolts to hold my backing plate into place. Problem is our backing plate hole is a little bit smaller than the big bearing setup that we're going with now, but it's no real big issue. So we'll just take a pick, set it here on the inside, kind of scribe or scratch. Now you can see the amount that we've got to take off around the perimeter of this thing to enlarge it just a bit. So now we've got to go get up close and personal, some cuddle time with a carbide bit. All right, our next step is to toss in a set of 410 gears and a POWERS unit that we got from Classic Industries. Now, you guys have seen us do this a number of times, so we're not gonna fool with showing that to you right now. But if you're interested in seeing it, just go over to PowerBlockTV.com and you can find it on there. But as for now, I've got a little bit of work to do, so if you guys wanna stick around, Mank's got something he'd like to show you.
Nobody likes compressing coil springs, but up ahead, we've got a great way to do it easily and safely.
Hey guys, welcome back. Well, Tommy's got the 12-bolt rear axle of our COPO Camaro taken care of, and once the firewall and the belly of the car get painted, it'll be ready to install. Well, I guess since he did the back half of the car, I got to get busy on the front, so let's get going. We're going to use the factory subframe that we took out of the car to keep it as close as we can to the original COPO Camaro. Once we detached it from the car and took off all of its related components, we took it to Lebanon, Tennessee to our friends at Blast from the Past. They completely blasted it for us with media and gave us a clean slate to work with. After we retrieved our front end and all of its parts, we rounded up our resident paint gunslinger, Tommy, and he camped out in the spray booth for a little while and got after it with some satin black paint, which will help us keep the factory look we were chasing after. For now, let's get all of this back on the front end and we'll have one less thing to worry about. Okay guys, as you can see, we're getting ready to put the lower control arms in the car along with the coil springs. And if you've done this, you know it's not a fun job. Most coil spring compressors are nothing more than externally mounted threaded rods. And sometimes they can be dangerous. What I like to do is take a single piece of threaded rod, if you have the room and the availability of space to do so, and put a single rod up through the center of the coil spring and bring the A-arm straight up, which will keep it from going anywhere should any type of accident try to happen. It'll all be contained inside of itself. The reason I like to do it this way whenever possible is I can pull the coil spring straight up into itself instead of pulling it at an angle, which is where the danger lies. It makes it a lot safer. We put a call into Classic Industries so we could get our hands on some disc brake spindles to replace the factory-style drum ones. It's time to put a steering box in our subframe. We've opted for a 16-to-1 manual unit that we got from Classic Industries. We've decided to go with the 16-to-1 unit because this is going to be a performance-oriented car. We want to be able to maintain tight steering control, and this one turns more quickly than the 20 and 24-to-1 models they also offer. These 11-inch rotors also came from Classic Industries. It's part of the disc brake conversion kit that includes everything you need to make the complete changeover from drum to disc. Well, there you go. The basic front-end rebuild we've done on our '69 Camaro, including suspension, brakes, and steering, are pretty similar to most cars from the muscle car era. With a little help from Classic Industries, we've done some upgrades that allowed us to maintain the stock look we were looking for, but give us the performance we were after. If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
go over to PowerBlockTV.com.
Today on MuscleCar, it's hanging suspension, pedal conversion, heater box swapping, radiator support fixing. Our COPO Camaro gets to stand tall on its brand new legs as the guys marry up the reworked subframe and modified rear end to the project. Find out how easy it can be to do this at home with a buddy. Then we cover a myriad of odds and ends from metalwork to pedal work.
Hey folks, today's going to be a good day because we've got a set of rejuvenated legs to put back under our 1969 COPO Camaro tribute car. And we're going to convert this small block heater box and automatic pedals over to the big block setup, and we're going to add that extra pedal so we can snatch on that 4-speed.
those legs that Tommy was talking about are right here. This is the 12-bolt rear axle that he rebuilt last time. It came out of a late 60s Chevy Impala, and Tommy cut it down to meet the specs of our pony car. This is the original subframe that came out of the car that we sent to our friends up in Lebanon, Tennessee, blast from the past. When we got it back and got it painted, we put a lot of the original components back on it and upgraded with a few that the original COPOs would have came with.
You may have noticed from the last time that you seen our old girl that the belly and the firewall's been cleaned up and painted. It's not going to be too much longer and the rest of the body's going to be ready for some paint also. But there's still a little bit of mild body work that has to be done. So I'm going to be hanging out here for a while today with Jason Anderson from Anderson Classic and Customs from Claremore, Oklahoma. We're going to be working on the doors, fenders, hoods, all kind of pieces, getting it ready to paint. Mr. Jason, won't you say hello?
Hi, Mom. How's it going?
So while those guys are doing that, since I've admitted to you I cannot do body work, I guess I'll put all of this back in the car. I've got the subframe in the starting position to put it back underneath the body of the car. Now obviously here at the shop we have the advantage of having the lift, but you guys can do this job at home on the floor, preferably just one end or the other at a time. I've done them in the past, and what I've done is left the rear suspension and axle hanging and just put jack stands under the front of the body, and that way you can move the subframe, because it's not that heavy, especially if you have a helper, in and out of the car and do it on the floor safely.
We talked to Classic Industries to get our hands on some black urethane bushings. The beauty of these things is that they give us the best of both worlds. The appearance of the classic style rubber bushing and the performance of urethane. Just 4 bolts and we can move to the rear.
The first thing we're going to do to get the rear suspension started is to wrestle these spring pockets up into the body of the car.
Installing your springs first means that you can wrestle them in place without having to use a jack like you would have to do if they were bolted to the rear end housing. It also means that the rear end is light enough that you and a buddy can pick it up and plug it into place fairly easily.
Okay.
We're using a multi-leaf hardware kit that we got from Classic Industries, which includes the U-bolts and other hardware to mount this thing up, along with the rubber isolators for the leaf springs and shackles.
Well, now that we've got the suspension and the rear end housing in the car, we're going to go ahead and put on the backing plates and install the axles.
We'll do the brakes later on, but for now, we'll throw on the drums to see what it looks like. Hey guys, we're plugging along with the body work on our old COPO project, and I'm getting to spend some quality time with that guy, Jason Anderson with Anderson Classic and Customs out of Claremore, Oklahoma. Now we've got plenty to do here, so you boys run off and go see what Mank's got to show you.
All Our 69 Camaro originally came with a Power Glide 2-speed automatic. If you remember, we're going to switch it over to a Muncie 4-speed. In order to do that, we've got these pedals that we got from Classic Industries to help us do the job. In order to get these pedals up underneath the dash where I need them, what I'm going to do is make the job a little easier on myself. Since we have to replace the gauges and the instrument cluster anyway, I'm going to drop the column, pull that whole cluster out, and it'll make it real easy for us to get the pedals up in there and get close to the firewall.
When it comes to removing parts like the dash and column on a build like this, make sure that you take good care of the wiring as you work. If you treat it right, being able to plug it all back in and move on will save you so much work. Yes, I know it can be tedious, but working a little harder early on to save way more effort later is always a good strategy. The pedals themselves are held in place by a clip on the right edge. Once you've got the clip off, the shaft that holds them in can slide out to the left, and you've eliminated the single brake pedal from your car. Realigning the shaft on the replacement pedals can be a little bit tricky. Mank is staging up the shaft, which is connected to the clutch pedal. Then he'll use it to try to line up the brake pedal into place. With a little gentle persuasion, the shaft finds its home. Then we can put our new clip on, which will hold everything together nicely.
Here we go. Well, now that we've got our 3 pedals hung, which is required for our Muncie 4-speed, there's something else we can take care of while we've got the dash apart, this heater box. The first thing we have to talk about that's going to be a difference, this is the stock heater core that came with a small block car where the inlet and outlet are all the way towards the center of the firewall. The one that we need for a big block, because of the actual physical size of the motor, the tubes have been moved all the way over to the passenger side in order to fit around the valve cover. There's a couple of different ways to accommodate the change we want to make for our heater cores from small block to big block. If you want to retain the stock small block heater box, first thing you can do is buy one of these seal retainers. You can make the necessary cuts with a hole saw to pass the tubes through here and here, and you should be good to go. Now that should make it operate just fine and dandy. With our COPO car, we want to maintain a certain caliber of quality, so a manufactured piece should work just a little better. So we got this heater box from Classic Industries. It's already been prepped with the holes needed for the big block heater core. It's pretty inexpensive and a good way to go.
The beauty of doing it like this is everything is made to fit where it sits and should plug all right into place without putting up much of a fight.
Okay guys, we're back. We've got most of the modification and changes we needed to do to the firewall finished, but we got to continue underneath the hood so we can get our motor in. We found out we had a couple of issues with our core support, so as long as we've got Jason Anderson still here from Anderson Classics, we're going to go ahead and take advantage of him and get him to fix it up for us. And by the way, did you leave Tommy out there doing all the bodywork by himself?
Sure did.
So, Jason, what do you think happened to this thing?
Looks like somebody Bo-duked it over a river at some time or another.
Well, you know what you're doing, and I got more than enough to do, so I'm going to leave you to it.
All right, I got this, Mank. Do something. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to try to fix the bottom of this radiator support with your normal household tools you may have laying around your house. Usually in a body shop you use something like this, a steel dolly. But anybody can find a piece of steel or something like that that you can grab out of your garage, shed, something like that, and then you can also use that as your dolly for your edges and to hit against. This lip is bent all up on this. It's supposed to look similar to this, and obviously it doesn't. So we're going to form this steel so that it is actually back into the original shape is what we're going to attempt to do here.
This big old ball peen hammer may look a little bit like overkill, but a radiator support is made out of some pretty stern stuff. And if you're using a legitimate body hammer, you might end up breaking the handle out of it. These tools can be perfectly fine for something like this radiator support, but of course, if you're looking at doing some actual body work, you might think about getting some actual body working tools. Locking pliers are going to help straighten out around the factory crimp, while maintaining the bends that are supposed to remain intact. A little more hammering and finesse with some patience thrown in for good measure, and you've got yourself a repaired panel.
That, my friends, is how you do it. Okay, so it took me about 15 minutes to straighten out the bottom edge of this radiator support here. So now we found a few issues on the top side of this radiator support pedestal. So we're going to flip this thing over and start doing some filler work to get it more appealing to the eye when you look in the engine compartment. These are prone to hold moisture, so they rot out underneath those bushings pretty good. What we're going to do is put a metal filler in there. We're going to use that first because it is a little stouter filler than just a plastic filler.
One great thing about metal reinforced filler is, unlike some of the other plastic fillers, is it's waterproof, which helps to cut down on corrosion in those troubled spots. The next step is to sand it down and smooth it all out.
And then we'll finish out the rest of the pinholes with a plastic filler.
In hard to sand spots like this, sometimes you can gain some ground with the use of a power sander. But you just have to be careful when you swap over to power tools like this, because they will remove material a heck of a lot faster than manual sanding will. The lower portion of the support is a little wrinkly as well, so a quick wipe with some filler and a round of sanding will whip it right into shape as well. And that should just about wrap it up.
All right, Jason, I finished up. Figured I'd come and check on you. Whoa, you're there.
Yeah, it's good to go. Ready to prime it, some satin black, and it'll be ready to put in the car.
Well, better job than I would have done. I'm glad you were here, dude.
No problem.
Today on MuscleCar, learn how to make a single trip to the parts store and come home with everything you need to paint your car. Our Tribute Camaro steps outside of the COPO norm with a jet black paint job that turns the sinister all the way up.
Hey folks, glad to see you're back with us today. We've made a lot of the mechanical transformations that we want to do to our COPO 69 Camaro Tribute car already happen, and we're well on our way to making our foot hit that pedal. We've partnered up with Chevrolet Performance to pay homage to one of the most legendary muscle cars to ever roll out of Detroit, the 69 COPO Camaro with the ultra-rare ZL1 factory racing big block. We've gotten our hands on an anniversary edition ZL1 427, number 426 out of only 427 that were made. And once we built the car around that monster power plant, keeping as close to the original COPOs as we can, she'll be ready for some serious action.
We've gotten to the part of the build where we can start prepping for the bodywork and paint on our COPO Camaro. Now you guys know that you don't want to do a bunch of mixing of manufacturers whenever it comes to paints and hardeners and that type of thing. That's just asking for trouble. So we're going a step beyond that by employing the entire Barrett-Jackson restoration system from prep and prime to color and finish.
It's not only a new system, it's a new way to buy paint and supplies. It's available in local auto parts stores, and you can get everything you need in one place.
For the first time, you can get abrasives, primer, color, clear, and even buffing compounds all engineered to work together. And anybody that appreciates high-end cars knows that they are synonymous with the name Barrett-Jackson. The bodyworking components include sanding blocks and discs, abrasives, and pads. The abrasives are available in strips that are made to work with a DA sander and an air file. The next step in the process is the epoxy primer. The primer kit contains the components needed to mix your primer for spraying. Everything you need comes in the box, including the proper hardener, mixing cup, and even gloves. It's an activated primer that features a high build body, which is ideal for sanding. And like everything in the system, it mixes 4 to 1.
As for color, the original COPO cars were no-frills, low-option muscle cars with one thing in mind: to go fast. That meant that they opted for some of the trim packages to be left out and also some of the stripe kits. That means that our car is going to be one solid color most of the way through. They have 12 colors to choose from, and these are the 5 most popular. We chose their jet black to coat our Camaro. It's a single-stage urethane that, just like the primer, includes color and hardener, mixing cup, stir sticks, strainers, gloves, and an application guide. Everything you'll need. Also, like the primer, the system is essentially built to be one-stop shopping to prevent you from having to find different components to match your paint. You can get all of this in one place, in one trip, at one time, including the clear coat as well.
The primer, color, and clear kits will each give you 5 sprayable quarts of material, which should be enough to cover any average car.
Once you put down the paint gun, you can finish up with their fine grit abrasives, the micro polish, and buffing pads. And to maintain and protect, they even offer a complete line of car care products with scratch remover, wax, wash, and detailer. It's a complete system that dramatically simplifies the process of painting your vehicle and keeping it car show worthy.
Now that you've seen what we're going to be using, we're ready to get hot and heavy on the bodywork on this thing. And while we're at it, we've got a few tips and tricks we're going to show you. We brought back Jason Anderson from Anderson Classic and Customs in Claremore, Oklahoma, to lend a hand with a part of it.
So we're at the point now that the car is blown off and ready to wipe some plastic filler on, so we're gonna mix that up and get going. Since how the quarter panel was finished off really nice and it's nice and smooth, we are putting a nice thin layer of the plastic filler on there to straighten up any imperfections on this quarter panel. As smooth as the quarter panel is, all you need is a light skim coat. It does not need to be a 1/4 inch thick or anything like that. Just one light skim coat and it should take out any of these light imperfections in these quarter panels like this. You'll be good to go. Now that our plastic filler is ready to sand, we're going to use the new Barrett-Jackson 40 Grit Premium Filament Abrasive to get this sanded up and ready to prime.
Jason is using the DA to rough in the bodywork, but like most things with car building, there is more than one way to skin a cat. You'll follow up the DA work with a Barrett-Jackson short block to massage out the more curvaceous areas.
Still ahead, knowing your filler and preventing mishaps. We check for and fix air bubbles in the plastic. Then it's time to start spraying.
Hey, we're back. Tommy and Jason are out in the prep booth still plugging away at the bodywork on our '69 Camaro Tribute car. Pretty soon that thing ought to be ready for primer.
What we plan on doing is finishing up the bodywork on our COPO Camaro with some of the Barrett-Jackson Restoration System abrasives. And then we're going to spray on some of their primer in preparation of color. The sanding elements that are a part of the system are resistant to clogging up, which has always been a problem with traditional sandpaper. These abrasives are designed to last up to 4 times longer than the old school stuff. When you get a little bit of buildup on the surface, just give it a good smack and it clears right up.
As you can see, we use 2 types of plastic filler on this project, each which has its own specific job. Let me show you what I'm talking about. On my mixing board here, I've got some heavy-bodied filler. This is the workhorse of the body world because this is the stuff that you use to do most of the flattening, smoothing, and sculpting that you want to achieve. And this is something else that sees quite a bit of mileage. Not as much as the heavy filler though, because it's for finer detail and finishing work. It's commonly called glazing putty or finishing putty. And you might be able to see that it has a thinner consistency than a heavy-bodied filler does, like comparing granulated sugar to powdered sugar. That's so it can fill pinholes and small imperfections easily.
Now, body filler is definitely always going to have its place in a body shop, but when using this type of stuff, there's always a few little things that you need to watch out for, and one of those are pinholes. Now, a good way to detect these things is to use compressed air and simply take an air blower and blow the dust out of it. Now, you'll find pinholes with all different types of sizes and shapes, but one thing I like to do is to use a pick and kind of dig them out. That way, whenever I fill them, it fills evenly. It doesn't come back and bite me later. And this is what I was talking about. This is just an old panel that we had sitting around the shop that we painted, and it had some previous body work done on it. And once we run it through a heat cycle, well, it had one of those boogered up spots show its face. Now, to repair this, it'll have to be sanded, filled, primed, and then repainted. And now that's a good bit of work that could have been prevented from happening all in the first place. Now that's kind of a big crater. Sometimes it takes more than one wiping to do it, or you could just glob it all on there at once and then sand it all down. Oh yeah.
We're clear over here for now. Hold it, time out, time out, time out. Yeah. We're like 4 feet from the door.
Perfect. Before you can spray anything, it's important to mask everything off, making it as tight as a drum. After all, it's just as important to keep contaminants from blowing out of the car onto the paint surface as it is to keep paint out of the car. We've got to mask up the openings of the door and then all the way around the car to the floor.
If terms like pot life and overlap make you scratch your head, then stick around and learn about the timetable you have to get your material from the gun to the car.
Hey, I hope you guys are ready to see us start spraying on our COPO Camaro. She's in the booth all masked up, and we're ready to start hitting it with some of our Barrett-Jackson Restoration System primer. Always refer to the data sheet on how to use the system properly. We're going to be using the Barrett-Jackson epoxy primer, which has an activator and has plenty of build to allow us to straighten up our car where needed. You start with the mixing cup that comes in the kit. It uses a very easy to manage 4:1 mixing ratio between the primer and hardener. Once it's mixed, use one of the supplied strainers to get it into the gun. At this point, you have what's called a pot life, which is the amount of time that you have to get the material onto the car before it loses the ability to adhere. Now, whenever you're tackling something like this, make sure that you use the proper safety equipment, like gloves, a paint suit, and a breathing apparatus. It's recommended to apply this primer within a temperature range of 60 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, using 55 to 65 pounds of pressure in a conventional gun. You want to apply 2 to 3 coats, spraying about 5 to 7 inches away from the surface. After about 90 minutes, we can scuff it or sand it one last time to give our color maximum adhesion. What we're doing with our car is sanding it because we are going for that maximum amount of quality in our finish. At this point, we've stepped down to the 320 to 400 grit abrasives in the Barrett-Jackson system, which is less aggressive than the 80 and 180 grits that we were using for the initial bodywork. Now, as a general rule of thumb, most people use 320 dry or 400 wet whenever you're sanding for paint. And you don't want to go any coarser than that, because what happens is whenever you sand the car, you're actually kind of creating these grooves, and whenever you paint over top of them, especially whenever you're using a metallic color, you're going to run into issues with the metallics looking all kind of crazy and stuff and actually following every stroke that you sand. But if you're using a solid color like a black, blue, green, whatever with no metallics in it, you usually don't run into that kind of issue. Now with dry sanding, I don't mind it because you get to see where you're at during the sanding process. But whenever you wet sand, a lot of times this stuff makes a big gnarly mess. But when wet sanding, the water flushes out all the powdered up stuff out of the paper and allows it to cut really quickly, but it is a lot more messy.
Still ahead, it's a lesson on the logistics of buffing your clear coat.
Well, our Camaro's at a point we can load up the gun, spray on some color. Been waiting for this. We're using the jet black paint from the Barrett-Jackson Restoration System. Like the primer and clear coat, it comes with everything you need in one self-contained kit and mixes 4:1. The paint has a longer pot life than the primer, which is 2 hours at 70 degrees. You can spray it over primed aluminum, steel, and fiberglass. And it's non-metallic, which means if you're new to the painting game, this might be a good option for you. Plus, there are few things that look meaner than a jet black muscle car. The color we sprayed on is a single stage paint, which means you could spray it on and call it good. But we're wanting to do a little bit of buffing later on, so we're going to go ahead and spray on some clear. Not only does it add some depth and clarity to the overall finish, it gives us some extra protection as well. Being able to come back and buff out the finish of a car is one of those things that really takes a job up to the next level. And a few good coats of clear will give us ample material to do so. When you apply this clear over the top of single stage paint, it needs to happen within 24 hours of when the paint is applied. Or you can come back and scuff the color with a gray scuff pad before clearing it. Use 50 to 60 psi with a conventional gun, spraying at 8 to 10 inches. You will also want to allow 2 to 5 minutes between coats. After 24 hours, the clear is ready to be buffed using the Barrett-Jackson restoration system. I'm going to go ahead and tape off a part of the hood so that I can show you a comparison. We'll start with one of these 1500 grit abrasive discs and wet sand the surface with mild detergent and water. Make sure that you're working on a clean surface so that you don't accidentally scratch it up. After that, we can switch over to the 2000 grit and go back over it. Now we're going to change over to the 3000 grit and cut down those scratches. Just going to keep an eye out to make sure that we smooth out all those other grits that we had sanded with previously. Our next step to getting the hood shiny again is using this wool pad along with the rapid scratch remover. And after that, we're going to follow it up with the red waffle pad using their deep shine micro polish. Now whenever you're buffing, you always want to keep the machine moving around on the surface, because if you stay in one spot too long, you're running the chance of burning through on an area. And whenever you're buffing an edge, I always like to buff off of the edge, not onto the edge, referring to the rotation of the buffing wheel. You want to make sure that the wool pad is running off of it, because whenever it tries to buff onto it, it always bunches up. There's a real good chance you're fixing to mess up bad. When you're working on enhancing the shine of a car's surface, no matter what products you're using, be prepared to spend some time. We're just going over this little bitty piece of the hood right now to show you how much you can change the look of the paint. But doing the whole car takes a pretty significant amount of manpower. Is it worth it? Well, heck, we'll let you be the judge of that. I've still got a good deal of buffing to do, and in the end, it'll be time well spent. I also think that we made a good color choice for this car.
Now the jury is still out on whether or not they actually made any black ZL1 COPOs, but from what we can tell, if they didn't, they sure should have. If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
Go over to PowerBlockTV.com.
Today on MuscleCar, learn how to take the concept of a Muncie 4-speed transmission and improve it with re-engineered and modernized parts that make it way stronger and more durable. Then, how to remove good glass without killing it and keeping the heat out of your ride.
hey, good to see you with us. We're in the midst of building a project that's modeled after one of the most iconic muscle cars that's ever graced the highways and byways of America, the '69 ZL1 427 COPO Camaro. We knew we wanted a Muncie-style 4-speed, and you can source your parts and the case out to many different companies. But if we were going to take this car as far as we wanted to, we knew we wanted to get our hands on the best parts possible.
So that's where Phil Hudson comes in. He's out of Syracuse, New York with a company called Auto Gear. They manufacture some of the smoothest and toughest Muncie 4-speed style transmissions available.
That's right. About in the year 2000, customers had problems getting quality parts for their Muncie rebuilds. So Auto Gear started with a new case and then went through the rest of the transmissions of what the parts we have today.
Phil's going to show us the ins and outs of their new 4-speeds, and while we're at it, we're going to get to see some of the ways they've improved on Muncie's original design.
Here's a transmission that we offer from Auto Gear, and here's the original Muncie. Our box offers more ratios than the original Muncie with extra added features that gives us more strength and durability.
Now, I've been around a couple Muncies in my time. Let's go see how one of yours goes together.
You can see right from the beginning, Auto Gear case is a lot thicker versus a Muncie. And this will add strength because on the Muncie case, they've had problems with the ears breaking off where you bolt up to the bell housing and with the countershaft breaking in the front of the case. And I'm going to show you something different about these two cases on the front. One of the problems with a Muncie case, after a period of time, this case would crack or this hole would become elongated right here, and you'd have gear separation and you'd have problems. And then with our case, we improved it by putting a steel plug, and it took the force and spread it over a wider area. Now we're going to start assembling our cluster, but when you get it from us, it's already one assembly. You have your third speed gear, your drive gear is already pressed on, and start our assembly. These are caged bearings, not the full comp, so it makes assembly a lot easier. Now we can bring in our case and start installing our cluster. Now we're going to install our counter shaft. It has a flat on the shaft, and it has to line up horizontal with the back of the case. If it's not lined up, you're not going to get your mid plate in place. Now we're going to install our reverse idler gear assembly. We'll set our reverse idler gear in, and we're ready to go on to our next step.
As we've been saying, AutoGear has done many things to improve their cases and their components over the stock units. Another one of them is this. The original mid plates are made out of aluminum and prone to cracking, as you can see there. AutoGear's plates are made out of cast iron and therefore much stronger. Also, the drive gear bearings and the mid plate bearings are sealed units versus the stock original bearings, which are open rollers and prone to contamination and any kind of material that might build up in there, inducing premature failure.
Once Phil has pressed the first and second speed clusters onto the main shaft, he can do the same with the speedo gear.
Phil's getting ready to install the main drive into the new transmission. But Phil, before you do, I know you guys offer two different options. Can you give us a brief explanation of what they might be between the two of them?
This is more like the original Muncie. They used a shim where they would put it over, and then the nut has to go this way because the oil would come through the input gear. So we have a wrench that's made to hold this nut so that you can tighten it. And with our input gear, you notice that it's a little longer. We got a longer pilot. This gives you more strength through here because now you're not rolling your spline right into the shaft, and then your seal will ride on the front and keep the oil from coming through the front retainer. Before we install our main drive, we have to put some grease on this bearing to keep these rollers in place. We have a cardboard sleeve that comes with this bearing as it's shipped to keep it contained. But once that sleeve comes off, the rollers can go every different direction. There we go. Bearings in place. Now we have a complete main shaft ready to be installed into the case. I'm going to apply the RTV to our surface to help our gasket. Put the gasket on. In order to get this shaft to go into the case, I need to move this sleeve into the fourth speed position, which is drive. And that'll clear our third speed step on the cluster. We're going to install our main drive bearing, and we have a special tool that we use it to press it in. Some people gently massage it with a hammer, but that's not the correct way of doing it. "20 foot-pounds of torque on the front retainer and on the counter shaft bolt, so we'll do both of those at the same time.
We're getting ready to set the side cover in, and I want to show you guys a couple of differences between AutoGear's new one and the original. First of all, theirs was made out of steel, and the original one was, like I said, aluminum. The shift forks themselves, this is the stock design where the pads would hold the shift sleeve just out here on the ends. AutoGear's new forks have a pad that goes completely around the whole 180 degrees. This means as the transmission ages, it'll keep it from rocking. The case also has a roller bearing inside, which means you will not get the roll in the egg-shaped hole that comes from years of service in the transmission, which can affect the shift. The side cover then goes onto the housing, being careful to make sure that the forks land correctly. Then we'll just install the vent on the top. Well, there you go. Thanks to the guys at AutoGear and Phil, we're one step closer to getting our COPO on the street and being able to have a good time with it. Thanks, Phil. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great honor, and enjoy your transmission.
No problem.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll show you the tools you can use to save your factory glass when you remove it.
Hey guys, welcome back. Every day we're getting closer and closer to taking a ride in our big block with a 4-speed Camaro. Now this black paint is starting to make this thing look pretty sinister, not to mention our wheels and tires. We put in a call to our buddies over at Coker Tire, and they hooked us up big time. For the tires, we're rocking a set of these Firestone wide oval F70 14s. These are true bias-ply tires like these cars would have come with back in the day, and they maintain an appearance that's accurate to that as well. We've got those wrapped around one of the iconic pieces of the COPO look. These base steel wheels that I've sprayed body color. These 14x7 wheels will eventually get a set of center caps from Classic Industries that will act like a little bit of jewelry for this old gal. With the outside of our Camaro well on its way, it's time to start making some motions to be able to put the interior in it. And one of those is being able to paint the top side of this dash because it's pretty sun faded. And to do that, I'm gonna have to pull out this window. Now somebody's replaced the windshield some time back, so I'm gonna try really hard not to screw it up. And so today, I'm gonna show you a few tips and tricks to use just in case you need to try this at home. One of your options for removing glass is what I call a pull type window knife. Now you just hook this blade right under the edge and then just simply pull it across the glass. And then there's just the windshield knife that takes a disposable blade that you can replace really easily, and it works really well whenever cutting along the bottom side of a dash. And then there's the big bad boy, the air knife or pneumatic knife. Now this thing will definitely get the job done, but it kind of requires a feel for cutting. And then there's the old school one that's referred to as the piano wire type. Now you run this through the glass and then you kind of saw it back and forth, kind of like an old two-man saw. The first one I'm going to demonstrate is the pull knife with a little bit of glass cleaner. You may be wondering, why in the world am I using glass cleaner? Well, on this dry rubber, I'm going to use a little bit of it for some lubrication because it helps in the cutting process. Now you just want to put the blade in as low as you can and then just kind of twist it. Now whenever you're pulling across here, I like to turn the blade, lean it back just a bit. What that does is that turns the blade edge up to get right along the edge of that glass, because otherwise you're trying to chew through all that rubber. It's kind of difficult to do. Okay, the next thing we're going to use is the just standard old knife. And the beauty behind this thing is it's long and has a lot of leverage to it. Now the next tool is the air knife, and all you would simply do is push this right through the sealer, push the button, and that thing will start doing its job. But I know my skill set with this thing, so I'm going to use the more primitive style tools. That way I've run less chance of kind of screwing stuff up because I don't have a real good feel for this thing. Next is the piano wire type. You gotta make you a hole for that piece of wire, and then you take this small piece of wire, push it back through if you can, and then feed that piece of wire into your pull handle. We're just about ready to start cutting. You don't want to be pulling up like that and trying to saw, because this edge of the wire will dig into the bottom of the glass, bust it, chip it, scratch it, chew it up. Well, there you go. Removing glass isn't all that difficult when you have the proper tools. And so are you guys out there that are afraid of breaking glass, don't be too afraid. Just pay attention. Unless it's already broken, then don't care if you break it or not. Just get the job done.
Still ahead, Meg gets out his hot plate and cooks up a side-by-side comparison to show you how to keep heat from ruining your summertime cruise. Plus a look at our COPO's clutch.
Hey guys, we keep chipping away at our old Camaro, getting it closer and closer to having it roadworthy. And today we're going to take care of an issue that'll make this thing a lot more comfortable while riding around in it. Now with our COPO, this thing doesn't have AC on it, so to make it as comfortable as we can, we're going to coat the floor with some lizard skin thermal coating. What that means is it's going to reduce the heat transfer 25, 30 or more degrees. And how that's going to help out, let's say you're sitting at a stoplight and it's August and it's hotter than blue blazes. When that car's just sitting there running, the floorboards seem like they're just on fire sometimes. But this stuff will make it a lot easier on you.
We wanted to show you guys just how much of a difference using this coating on your car can make. So we've set up a simple test with a hot plate, and we've coated one half of it with the lizard skin and left the other side bare. Okay, I'm going to take the infrared thermometer, put it on the untreated side. You can see the surface temperature is around 220, 225. And we'll take it over to here, and the temperature is all the way down to 195, 194, 193. Right in that neighborhood. That's quite a difference, as promised. That was absolutely the best comparison we could ever have got. This thing isn't even melting yet at all. This thing just started moving like a slug, leaving a trail going across. Well, you can't ask for better performance than that out of a product. Did exactly what they said it would and delivered. So what do you think? Go put some in the car. The spray kit comes with a mixing wand, which you can attach to a standard drill to mix it thoroughly. Make sure this stuff is good and mixed up. A tip for pouring it into the gun. Pour it from several inches above the can, and that'll keep it wrangled and prevent a mess.
stuff is very easy to spray. You just want to make sure that the surface you're spraying it on is clean and oil free. You also want to avoid spraying over raw steel. So we've hit our floor with some Duplicolor edge primer where it was needed. Hold the gun about 10-12 inches from the surface, use a slight overlap, and you've got it made.
Once we've given it about 24 hours to dry out, our floor is ready to think about interior components. Lizard skin also can be used to insulate against radiant sun heat under your headliner. Our headliner is in great shape though, it just needs cleaned, so we'll leave it alone. All right, we've got our lizard skin applied to the floor of the 69 COPO Camaro. I want you guys to know that the one that we used in the white bucket is for heat control because of our big power plant, because of the big exhaust system it's going to have, and because it's just basically a lightweight car and we're going to transfer a lot of it. Another product from Lizard Skin is the sound deadener. You can use both of them if you want to, but if you do, you have to remember that the sound control goes on first and the thermal control goes on second. You'll want to apply them in that order so that they'll both do their job together once applied. All right, now that we've got our gearbox built with the help from Auto Gear, we're ready to mate it to our 427 to put this package together. We've decided to go with the OEM style clutch assembly like the one we got from Hayes, which we know will work well because of their years of proven performance. We're also going to use the mechanical style linkage instead of the hydraulic, which is available, but this, more guys that are still in drag racing and more guys that are still into muscle cars prefer the feel of this mechanical linkage with their foot on that pedal. Hayes clutch kits come into 3 major styles of clutches, and each kit comes with a pressure plate, throwout bearing, the disc assembly, and the clutch alignment tool. And one thing that may interest you guys, Hayes clutch discs are made completely out of organic materials.
We'll use the clutch alignment tool to, well, align the clutch. Then the pressure plate can go over top of it. When you tighten your pressure plate bolts down, make sure you follow the manufacturer's specs to get the correct amount of torque.
If you can do this while the engine is out of the car, it's a whole lot easier than laying on your back under a car in the dark trying to do it uphill, both ways. All right, Tom, if you want to finish bolting this up, I'm going to take off, get some more parts. I'll be right back.
Hurry up. He ain't gonna hurry up. Some ARP assembly lubricant is recommended when you're using ARP bolts. And since we're putting these super strong bolts into an aluminum block, it's a must. There you go, we're one step closer to dropping this big bad dude off into our COPO. But you guys stick around, Mike's got something he'd like to show you.
Today on MuscleCar, work on the COPO Camaro conversion continues as we put a spring in your step. Well, in your backside anyway, as the guys show you how to repair a ragged old busted up seat frame. Then we show you how to save $600 by converting your steering column from auto to manual.
Hey guys, nice to see you. Today we're going to continue working on our 69 COPO Tribute Camaro, and the time has come for us to start doing some upholstery work.
We've decided to try and save our original seat frames, but we're obviously going to change the padding and the covers because they're a little worse for wear. Now, our original seat frames are going to need some repair work, and we'll get to that in just a second.
But first we had to decide what we were going to cover our seats with. So we gave TMI Performance Interiors a call, and they had exactly what we needed for our Camaro. And they have a whole lot of options, and all those options fit over stock seat frames. You have the choice of upgrading your seat padding to their Sport Seat 2, and their Sport R models. These progressively increase the bolstering in the side of the seat, which in turn gives you a whole lot more support for performance applications. They also support the restoration market by offering stock style foam, seat covers in different colors, vinyls, and styles.
And since deciding the look of your interior goes hand in hand with the way it's going to feel, the Sport R models can also be personalized with things such as custom colors, premium vinyl and unisuede inserts, as well as contrast stitching on the bolsters.
The COPOs came with a base interior, so that's the choice that we're going to make. Now, just like Mink said, we've got to do a little repairing to our springs because they're in kind of bad shape. We've got a few of them that's broke, the frame's kind of jacked up, but it ain't nothing that's non-repairable. Now, the first thing that we noticed, well, our seat frame was broken where these 2 spot welds had just come loose. That stuff happens over time. We also noticed that the main frame wire had come unhooked from the frame, and it needs to be like this one. Something else that we found, the side supports were broken on both sides of this thing, which isn't no big deal, we'll just have to take care of them. I'm going to start by drilling a couple of holes so that we can spot weld the frame back together. Then the main wire can be hooked back into place with the tab being knocked back down to hold it in. Then the tougher part of the repair begins.
Sometimes these clips can be a little bit of a bear, but they're not supposed to let go of the wire.
Now to replace our springs, we went to a local upholstery shop and just got some spring material. The stuff isn't really expensive and it's a must whenever you're doing this type of repair, because you can't simply weld this springs together because it's sprung steel, and once you weld it, it's going to crack on either side of the weld. You want to be careful with these tabs when you're putting them back into place. They've been known to break off before. Now the old clips that we took off, you could reuse them again, but heck, they make new ones. We just picked these up at the local upholstery shop where we got the new springs. This stuff is really and truly not all that expensive, so while you're there, just go ahead and pick up a few of these and get some extras just in case you kind of consume or waste a couple, if you know what I mean. Okay, with that done, now I've got to cut this excess off. Now you could just cut it, but you're running a chance of where you snipped it coming back through on your upholstery. It needs to be bent back like this one here. So I'm going to use a torch and get it all hot so that I can pull it around and snip it off. And that also keeps it from slipping out of this clip. Well, there you go. That pretty much got our seat frame all repaired. Now all we have to do is install the foam, followed by the upholstery, and this thing will be ready to set in the car. And yes, we'll let the frame cool off before we start putting the foam and material over top of it. So don't send me any angry emails, please. Well, there you go, guys. We've had us what you would call a seat makeover. The springs are all stiff, the foam feels good, and when riding in this thing, it's not going to feel like you're sitting on the floorboard. So spend your little time and get yourself a set of these seats. For the most part, our interior is just about finished up in our COPO tribute car. Mr. Mank over here has got our original automatic column that come out of our Camaro. It's not in too bad of a shape, but with the 4-speed from Auto Gear that's going to propel our car, we certainly don't have any need for an automatic shifter up on the column. The bad news is a new factory style column can run you close to $700. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. This column here has all the components needed to swap that automatic column back over to the manual floor shift style.
And the best part is, this baby only cost us $100.
You mean cost me $100?
Build on a budget. Muscle car projects that save you time and money.
Well, Mr. Mank, I'm going to let you kind of fiddle-faddle with these steering columns because I've got a little bit of work to do on the Camaro. Good luck with it. May the power be with you and all that mushy stuff.
First, we'll get rid of a bunch of easy stuff to remove, like the hazard knob and the shift lever, followed by the upper column mount bracket, which only has a few bolts. Then, the steering wheel has to come off. Trying to do this without a steering wheel removal tool is way more hassle than it's worth. So if you can get your hands on one of these, removers are well worth it. There's also another tool for removing the lock sprocket, and yes, you'll want this too. The good news is that both of these are cheap, and often you can borrow one. The next piece to come out is the horn contact, then the bearing and the retainer. That will let us get the turn signal cam assembly out. We're in the home stretch now, and a few small bolts come out which hold the upper housing on the column. At this point, the steering shaft assembly is ready to come out. Then with a few taps of the hammer, we can remove the shifter collar. That's it. That's the piece we need to switch. Then guess what? Now the whole process has to be repeated on the old column. Old parts like this, as you know, have a tendency to decide that they prefer the company of one another, and it makes it hard to get them apart. The good news is we've seen how it comes apart once already on the other column. All right, now that you guys had to watch that painful display of me tearing apart two old steering columns, here's what we were chasing. Our original column in the car was an automatic with the selector up on the column itself. We're going to eliminate that because we're going to have the car with the 4-speed system, which means we wanted to get rid of this tower here and make it smooth. This is the correct one we need. It's smooth all the way around and is the correct piece for a floor shift car, whether it was an automatic with a console or a 4-speed. And as long as we're this far apart, I'm going to go ahead and replace the tumbler and key unit inside the column. A helpful hint for you guys, when you're doing it, you're going to find a tab down inside this slot here in the column that has to be compressed. It's hidden and it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you need to do this to get it out of the unit itself, or it will not be that easy. Well, I've got this thing tore apart as far as I want to take it down. This thing still has some mechanical parts in it, and they're working well, so I'm going to leave them be and clean this piece by hand. But we're going to take these 2 pieces and some of the other smaller ones and put them in a blasting cabinet, clean them up, and repaint them so they're ready to go. With a coat of black Duplicolor trim paint on the parts, reassembly can begin on our column. While we had it apart, we also made sure that all the bearings were clean, as well as re-greasing them. Installing a new ignition tumbler is pretty simple. It's just a matter of pushing it into place. This little copper contact is the ground for the horn, and it has to be properly seated before the signal cam goes back in. Well, there you go. For the most part, our column is finished and ready to go. We had to do a little tedious work, but we did save ourselves several $100s by doing so. We're going to get ready to put it in the car, but I'm going to leave the top off in case we have to make any adjustments to the tumbler or in case we have to do any circuit testing once everything's hooked back up in the car itself. We'll be good to go.
Hey guys, I'm to a point that I kind of need to take a break from doing all that wet sanding and buffing on the Camaro, so I decided might as well get started on repairing the grill. We got a couple of gnarly spots, but luckily for us, they are repairable. The first step we're going to move into is removing the trim off of it. Because we're going to end up having to paint this thing, might as well get it out of the way. Just kind of wiggle this stuff off. Don't put a whole lot of pressure on it because you don't really want to tweak this stuff because it's a bear to try to straighten back out. Here's another little tip for you. If you're taking things apart, put them back together. I know it sounds pretty simple, but this way, if it's already back together, you can't forget how it goes back together. To make the repair, we're going to use this 2-part epoxy. Now, if you were working and trying to repair a grill that was far more busted up than the one that we're working on, they actually make a webbing or netting style material that you can use for the more serious repair. This stuff works as a structural component to make the repair a lot stronger. This particular epoxy is designed for plastic repair, which makes it suitable for what we're trying to do. Now we're ready to move on to the sanding side. I'm going to use this custom sanding block that I made, which is actually just an old stir stick with a groove cut in it, a piece of 80 grit. Now before I go to sanding, I'm going to take my knife and kind of trim this edge off a bit. And the reason I'm going to do that instead of wrapping the sandpaper around is that whenever I go to sand, I'll be removing material from this edge and that edge. And I don't want to remove any from that side. You may have noticed while I'm sanding this, I'm actually not sanding it flat against this surface because I'm trying to add a taper to this repair. That way whenever I put my filler in there, it broadens the surface. Instead of just being right on this edge, it's actually down past it a bit. Now I need to build me a form so that whenever I put this stuff in there, it won't just flop over. So I'm going to take this paint paddle, trim it down a bit, see if that'll work. Now it might surprise a few of you out there to know that I've tried my hand at whittling, and about the only thing that I know that I can make is kindling. That one will work. Now before you start applying the epoxy onto your repair, it's a good idea to squirt out a decent amount to ensure that the stuff is mixed properly. I know that's a little excessive, but I can come back and trim it and shape that stuff. There it goes. And there we go. I'll use a knife to trim away the bulk of the excess because it helps to cut down on the sanding time. We still need to do some sanding and we'll go through several grits to get it smoothed out. I'm also going to use a dab of glazing putty to get it nice and straight. Now all we got to do is spray on some primer, do a little bit of sanding, and then paint this thing black to match the rest of our Camaro. Now if you're working on a grill that has several more broken spots, you got to do the math whether it's worth repairing or not. They do offer a new grill for the Camaro, but for the material that we spent, it's less than 20 bucks. If you're working on a car that they don't offer one, well, that's probably, really and truthfully, your only option is to repair it. So just spend a little time, get some kind of primitive tools, give it a shot.
If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
go over to PowerBlockTV.com.
Today on MuscleCar, it's inside, backside, and underside. Our COPO Camaro tribute project moves forward with an interior installation. Tommy shows us how to properly restore a neglected piece of your ride, and a new exhaust system goes behind that big block to let it exhale.
hey folks, thanks for joining us. Progress is coming along nicely on our 69 Camaro COPO tribute project. We're getting ready to put some of the shiny pieces inside the car. We've already built the seats, rebuilt the steering column, and we've even painted the dash on the old girl.
Today's the day that we finally get to put interior in our COPO. Now, we sourced all these pieces from TMI Performance Interior, and if you remember back, that's where we got our seat foams and covers from. They manufacture and distribute a wide variety of interior components for Ford, Chevy, and even Volkswagen restoration projects, and that includes both your classic cars and some late models as well. Not only do they have stock interiors, but if you've got a little bit more of a custom taste, they can help you out with that too. We'll pick it up with the rear panels because they have to go in before the seats. Then we're ready to start with the rear seats, of which the back goes in first, held in place by these little tabs on the outer edge of the frame. Then the bottom can go in and we can move on to the front. Each of the front seats are held in by 4 bolts, and it's just that simple. Alright guys, sometime whenever you're installing door panels, getting this little door lock rod lined up can be kind of difficult. A little tip for you is to use the pull knob. Just simply slide it through, thread it on 1 or 2. Makes it a lot easier to line it up. Now for those of you out there that's taken a door panel off and removed a window crank, you've probably seen this little piece, and you've probably thrown it by the wayside, because I know I have. This little jewel actually serves a purpose. When you pop this thing on there, this little piece of plastic actually protects the door panel from this little edge cutting onto it. Also, it works as a little protector to keep from popping the clip off. Now what actually holds a door handle on is a really primitive little clip. But taking these things off sometimes can be a bear. Now they do make a tool that's kind of a fork that slides in and pushes that clip off, but I have used that tool and I've cut the door panel before. What I like to use is just a simple old grease rag. Now I'm going to show you on this one because it's easier to see, but on the other type, you've just got to spread it open so you can get the rag into it. But all you do is kind of wrap that rag around it and then pull it. And a lot of times that little clip is hung in your rag and you don't have to go looking for it. When you're doing something like this, you want to make sure to roll up the window because otherwise you're probably going to bust it. Perfect.
For the gauges in our Camaro, we've decided to go with something cool and different. We wanted to keep the vintage look, but also have the modern technology that's available. For that reason, we've gone with the 1969 series gauges available from New Vintage. This particular kit features full sweep gauges with backlit dials and pointers, as well as integrated warning lamps and signals. The kits for these also include peripherals like pressure senders and convenient color-coded snap-in wiring harnesses. Another thing that's cool about these gauges is they come in a ton of different stylings for classic and muscle cars as well as custom configurations. They're way more accurate than stock OEM style gauges and are backlit with LEDs to make them way more visible.
Coming up, find out how to accurately restore the looks of your trunk, assuming there's no junk up in that trunk. Then it's header installation, including a great way to keep your bolts from ever backing out.
Hey guys, we're moving on to a part of the restoration process of our Camaro that oftentimes gets overlooked, and that is redoing the trunk. Now this job definitely has a big bang for its buck because normally it only costs you a couple hours and less than 150 bucks to do the whole thing, whether you're planning to keep the car, resell it, or even show it. The first thing we've got to do is get the trunk pretty much all cleaned out. Now it looks like somebody's installed a new mat in our car, so we're going to keep it and just clean it up and reuse it. That will save us some coin too. Now at some point in time, somebody's already recoated our trunk, but it still doesn't look 100%. And down here on the bottom, you can see where we've got a little bit of rust of an issue, so we've got to do some scraping to get all that off. Luckily for us, we caught this stuff just at the right time. The rust has just started to blister, and the metal is in good shape without any holes. Bust out your vacuum cleaner for this job because we want to keep our work surface as clean as possible. With all that stuff out of the way, I'm going to move on to the sanding process and kind of give it some tooth with a wire brush and a scuff pad. If you skip this process, it's going to be a complete waste of time because the new coating you're going to spray on it, it's going to eventually just peel off. So it's time to get to work. On a rough surface like this one, you want to use a wire brush because sandpaper just won't do the trick. Then make sure that you vacuum up all that old crud and hit it with some wax and grease remover. All right guys, we're going to coat our floor with some Duplicolor self-etching primer and then follow it up with some primer sealer to get it to a uniform grade. Etching primer is designed to chemically etch the metal surface that you spray it on, which will promote adhesion by the primer itself. Then on the top of that, the primer sealer will have no trouble adhering, and it seals off the metal from further corrosion. The next coating that we're going to apply is the Duplicolor spatter paint. Now this stuff is very similar to the OEM finish that this thing would have originally came with. That's kind of a speckle finish. They offer it in 3 different colors: black and aqua, black and gray, and the gray and white. Now this stuff just simply sprays on, and like any other coating, you want to make sure that it's free of dust, debris, oil, grease, grime, any of that stuff. So make sure your surface is very clean. Another thing to keep in mind when spraying is temperature and humidity, because you don't really want to paint outside in the direct sunlight either, because if the surface you're painting is hot to the touch, it's too hot to coat, because what ends up happening is when you spray all that stuff on, it instantly dries and creates all these uneven spots and just turns out looking like crap. So just make sure that whenever you're painting, it's cool to the touch. Now you could use something like spray-on bed liner to do this, like you would find in the back of a pickup truck. But that wouldn't have that OEM look that we're after. Besides, this stuff does a pretty good job of hiding imperfections and the funky spots. While that stuff's drying, I'm going to add on a couple of little details that's going to add a different level to our restoration. And they're simple little decals. Both of them go on the trunk. One of them talks about the rear axle that's installed in the car. The other one's the jacking instructions. Now when installing these things, you don't have to get too exact with them, because no offense to whoever installed them back in the day, they weren't measuring these things out to install them. Heck, I've even seen the jacking instructions upside down on the trunk lid. Seriously. If you remember, there was a trunk mat that was already in the car. We can save some bucks by cleaning this one up and putting it back in. If you need one for your car, you can find them at Classic Industries, and they're an important piece to the puzzle when it comes to restoring factory appearances. Now, since this mat has a little bit of that old wrinkliness to it, I'm going to take a heat lamp and warm it up just a bit to let it smooth itself out. After about 45 minutes or so, it's nice and flat. Another alternative is just to sit it out in the sun and let it do its thing.
Stick around to see how you can have the luxury of an MP3 player along with the appearance of a factory radio.
Hey folks, welcome back. It's time for us to get up underneath our Camaro and address a couple things we've got to do underneath. And one of the first ones is going to be our exhaust system.
In addition to that, we've got that GM Performance ZL1 427 and Auto Gear 4-speed mocked into place. And that transmission, well, it needs a cross member. We've got just the right thing sitting right over here. This is the X Factor 2 cross member from American Powertrain. Now this particular one is designed to fit perfectly under our first generation Camaro, but they offer other ones out there, such as your early Mustangs and Fox bodies. The X Factor 2 is 50% lighter than a stock cross member, as well as 20% lighter than the first generation X Factors. It features a modular aluminum construction and is certified to handle up to 1,500 horsepower. It uses the stock mounting holes in the subframe, and it's designed to fit all your popular transmissions, whether it's manual or automatic. And that manual case that we're running, oh, it ought to fit like a dream. Plus, with the versatility of this kit, it makes it great for street and racing applications. With the side support brackets attached to the subframe, you can see that the beauty of this unit is that it's got tons of horizontal adjustability. This swappable bracket offers even more capabilities for adjustments, this time vertically. Oddball engine and tranny combos would be no problem.
As for that exhaust system we were talking about, it's going to start right here with this set of long tubes that we got from Doug's Headers. These headers are ceramic coated to keep them nice and shiny for many years to come, and also to insulate heat. They feature full-length steel tube construction with 1 7/8" primary tubes. The walls are 16 gauge steel, and they all terminate into a 3.5-inch collector. Every Doug's header is properly tuned using the correct diameter and length tube needed in order to remove exhaust gases from each cylinder efficiently, therefore increasing torque and horsepower dramatically. And they're also designed on the car they're meant to fit, which makes it easy to check and recheck during designing and manufacturing processes. Before we actually put the headers in the car, I want to show you guys something that we love around here: Stage 8 locking fasteners. We all know the header bolts will not stay tight. Well, their design of these 3-piece clips right here combines into this up here, and if you turn the bolt and put the block right up against the pipe and then lock it, it will never come undone. We're going to use these Mr. Gasket copper gaskets because we'll get a better seal on our aluminum heads, and they don't tend to burn out as easily as the paper.
In this situation, it's easier to slip the headers in from the bottom. With some cars and some engine setups, the top is the way to go. Like Mank said, we want our bolts to stay put, and with these Stage 8 fasteners, we'll be in good shape.
We've got our headers in, we've got our header bolt lock system in, but I got to make mention of one thing to tell you guys if you've ever put headers in a car. These Doug's headers required absolutely no clearance on tubes whatsoever. Putting this big block in this first generation Camaro, that's quite a feat.
Up ahead, see a transverse muffler exhaust system installed in a pony car.
Hey guys, glad you made it back. We're ready to move on to the exhaust on our COPO. So we broke out the exhaust pipes, and we're going to go with a full stainless kit that we got from MagnaFlow. It's a 2.5-inch diameter unit, plus it comes with a crossover pipe that balances out the left and right side, and a transverse muffler that mounts up and behind the rear axle. MagnaFlow systems come with a lifetime warranty, and they're all dyno tested and proven to make power. You can expect performance gains in horsepower and torque in a smooth, deep tone. The system is easy to install with mandrel bent tubes that are specifically designed for 67 to 72 Camaros and Firebirds.
There you go.
There we go. And once it's in, that stainless steel construction looks great under your car. And since we're running headers, we'll start at the rear and work our way forward. That's because we don't know how long the front pipes need to be, and assembling the back first will help us determine that. Putting the dry shaft in now will help ensure that we don't have any fitment issues once everything's hard mounted. Then the X-pipe goes in. Now we'll work on getting everything adjusted and symmetrical. All of this exhaust tube needs at least a 1/2 inch of clearance between it and anything around it. That includes moving parts like the rear end and suspension. Last, we measure the pipe that connects the collectors to the rest of the system and cut them to length. Now I know this isn't stock, but this is one sweet looking system. And if you've ever put in a MagnaFlow kit, you know that these things look great, go together really well, and sound better than $1 million. Now one more thing that I want to show you that we're going to install into our COPO is kind of a creature comfort. Now I know most of the COPOs didn't have any kind of tunes or radios in them, but a few of them, they did. So since I like to listen to some good tunes while I ride around, this is one of the few bells and whistles that we're going to throw at it. This may look like a factory Chevrolet radio from back in the day, but it's actually a USA 630 Concourse radio from Custom Auto Sound. What you see here is a 300 watt AM/FM receiver that has the large push buttons like the car would have had from the factory. Now not only does this thing look vintage, but it's got some pretty cool modern features to it. This hideable USB input on the back of the radio allows you to plug in a USB flash drive for playback of song files. The display shows the song, artist, and album titles while you're cycling through your MP3 or WMA files. It's got a built-in controller for an optional CD changer that is offered by Classic Auto Sound that will interface with, charge, and control your iPod. They have cool accessories like this amplified subwoofer and speaker system, which are disguised as vintage AC vents. The 250 watt sub and amp combo are designed with a low profile so you can maintain that factory look but still have a powerful sound system. It won't be too much longer and that big bad Camaro of ours will be humming us a sweet little tune. So you guys keep watching, we're just about there.
If you've got any questions about anything you saw on the show today,
go over to PowerBlockTV.com.
Today on MuscleCar, the COPO Tribute Camaro gets the finishing touches and comes to life. See how we ensure that big block is prepped to fire and then tuned to run like an animal. Then watch as we take her out and see just how mean she can be.
Well, it's been a good long while since our '69 Camaro COPO Tribute car rolled in the door. But today, the best part, we get to drive it.
And one thing's for sure, this old girl's came a long ways in the short amount of time it's been here. The whole thing started right here with a limited anniversary edition ZL1 427 from Chevrolet Performance. Boasting an all-aluminum construction and high-performance internals, this thing is rated at 430 ponies, but that rating is far shy of its true potential.
They were modeled after the iconic crown jewel of the Chevrolet Big-Block family. The original ZL1s were close to 500 horsepower, feather-light, fire-breathing monsters that were originally designed for use in Can-Am race cars. But 69 lucky F-bodies were a rare recipient of these engines, as special-ordered central office production orders, the legendary ZL1 COPO Camaros.
Only 427 of these new ZL1s were ever produced, and ours is one of the last, number 426. It came with a period-correct Holley 4-barrel carb, a special certificate of authenticity, and even a limited edition jacket.
But we needed a car to build around that big block. We found the perfect platform in this, a small block 69 Camaro that has been well cared for over the years. It required a minimum amount of bodywork, and surprisingly, the owner had all of the documentation for the car, including the original sales receipt.
Once we got it back to the shop, the first thing that had to come off was the chrome.
Tommy nailed an Impala 12-bolt rear end, and the suspension was plugged into place.
A coat of black gave it the sinister look we were after, and a modernized 4-speed will sit behind our 427 and drive our steel wheels.
We laid down some heat insulation on the floorboard to keep the interior nice and cool, then installed our clutch kit, followed by our new transmission. The seat frames had to be repaired in a few places. Then we gave them new foam and covers. After that, we rebuilt the steering column, and Tom used some epoxy to repair the plastic parts of the grille. The trunk needed some attention too, so we refinished it and used some spatter paint.
And a set of long tube headers will help move that spent fuel out of our stainless exhaust.
All we've got left to do is make sure our fluids are topped off and good to go. And for the motor, we're going to use some of Joe Gibbs driven brake-in oil. This brake-in oil is used by Joe Gibbs Racing to break in and dyno all their engines. The additives promote ring seal and provide protection for cams and lifters during initial break-in. It's also good for full power pulls on the dyno, one night of racing, or up to 400 miles on the street before it has to be changed.
Now, if you're in the market for a crate engine, there's one thing that you want to keep in mind. You have no idea of how long that thing's been sitting in some warehouse whenever it shows up at your doorstep. So you want to make sure to prime the engine, because whenever they assemble that engine, they use a lube to make sure everything's all nice and wet. But whenever that thing's sitting in the warehouse, all the oil settles to the bottom, and if you try to crank it dry, well, you're just asking for trouble. Now, there's several companies out there that offer a priming tool, but there's a cheap and easy alternative. You can use an old distributor to make one. First step to getting there is you gotta get it apart. You'll wanna begin by taking a punch and knocking out this roll pin, which will allow you to get the distributor gear off. Then I'll grab some WD-40 to help loosen up the oil buildup which accumulates on the shaft. The top of the housing needs to come off to allow us to attach a drill for priming. Now I just gotta do the same thing to the shaft. Now we're going to cut up the distributor drive gear just a bit, because there's some parts of it we need and some we don't. We need the side that goes to the oil pump because that's what aligns it onto the shaft, but we don't need the gear part of it because to spin it, we'd be turning the camshaft also. With everything all cut up, we got to do some cleaning, and to do that we're going to use some CRC brake clean, because you don't want all this junk in your engine. A little flirt with the air hose will get the big chunks out of the way. You know, I'll get after these parts with the brake cleaner. Don't be afraid to use a generous amount, because you'll be sticking this thing in your engine. You want it to be clean. With everything all clean, we're ready to start the assembly process. Just slide the collar on. Then we're ready to slide it into the housing. Now you want to pay attention to this little bitty wear line here, and what that is, that's exactly where this housing used to run. But what we're going to do is slide it out about a 1/4 inch or so, and then slide on one of these thrust washers. What this thrust washer is going to do, we're going to tack it in place. That way when we're all said and done, if you didn't have it on there, the shaft would just fall out of the housing. See, there's not that much to it. You just chuck this thing into a drill, you're ready to prime. We just got primed.
Still ahead, we tune the timing and the carb on the ZL1 Big-Block and show you how to do it too. Then the Camaro rolls out on her maiden voyage.
Okay guys, now that Tommy's got the engine primed, there's a couple things we need to touch on before we put the distributor back in the motor. The oil pump is driven by the gear on the bottom of the distributor. Well, when Tommy removed this gear, in order to keep from turning the camshaft, we had to mate this end of the tool up, which is identical to the end of the distributor we have here. It will only go in one of two ways, either straight in or 180 degrees out. Now, when putting the distributor back in the motor, there's a certain area that most guys want number 1 to be, first for them to remember positioning and also to get the firing order correct. So what we'll do is drop it in the back to see if it will go, in fact, all the way in where we'd like it to be. If it doesn't, which it doesn't seem like it's going to do by turning the gear, we'll pull it back out, and we can use Tommy's tool to turn just the pump and put the blade for the distributor in the position we want it to be in to get the rotor to face where we want it to be on the motor for cylinder number 1. We've made a slash on the top of the distributor shaft to show us which way the blade is pointing now inside the motor. We've got it turned to where we want it to be, approximately in the area where number 1 is on this distributor. Now we'll pull it back out. Reinsert the distributor and turn the rotor. Not bad. And here's another little interesting piece of information you guys might want to know. In Chevrolet motors, both big and small block, the rotor rotates in a clockwise direction, and the firing order is 184, 365, 72. On initial startup, we like to use water instead of antifreeze just in case there's a leak. And it just so happens we found one on a pipe plug on the passenger side of the engine. Just a dab of Loctite, thread sealant, and this will fix it up.
Well, here we are. We're fixing to start the Camaro for the first time, and hopefully we don't have any noises that we're gonna have to fix. I'm gonna do a very important role, sit here in the interior and be comfortable, but I'm gonna be checking on the gauges to make sure if things head south, I'll know it before it gets bad. And Mapford, he's gonna do some tuning out there. Now this is when you bring the motor up to temperature to begin the break-in process. We'll be doing some initial engine tuning while we're at it, but you want to move pretty quickly to get it all set. You can start by tuning it by ear. Then you also adjust the idle screw to bring the engine up to a good RPM range for what we're doing right now.
How much oil pressure we got, Tom? We good?
Yeah, we got probably 60 pounds.
That's good. Now the real timing can begin. We'll bust out the timing light, and it looks like we're running pretty high, 34 degrees. This big block likes to sit down around the neighborhood of 15 degrees initial timing.
During initial timing, the vacuum advance is left off, but we reconnected it while we let the engine warm up to adjust the carburetor. We'll then unhook it to run it to this little jewel, which is a vacuum gauge that we'll use to dial in our carb.
And the way we're going to do this is we're going to turn this mixture screw and try and get the maximum inches of vacuum, which is the air flowing through the idle circuit, on this gauge. And when we do, that's when we'll stop turning the screw onto this side and transfer over to the other side and get a good balance. The needle might fluctuate on you, especially depending on your cam. Just keep an eye on the needle's highest point. That's one side.
Sounds pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you what, it does. It sounds really good, but that's enough for the laboratory. It's time for some practical application.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. To disagree, there's one or two pieces, small things we should take up before we
nope, we'll do that. Goggles.
Yeah, I do have a pair of shades.
Goggles.
Stick around and see the COPO spread its biased ply wings and fly. This car was built to burn rubber, and it treats those rear tires like a pair of roller skates.
Now I have to say this old Camaro is one of the funnest builds that we've gotten to do. I guess it doesn't get much more iconic than this. There's no denying that this car is a muscle car. It has the look, it has the stance, shoot, it even has the smell. And you know one thing, it's got the power. This aluminum big block ain't no joke. So let's take it for a cruise and see how she does.
Feels like an old muscle car.
Kind of like what they're supposed to feel like. Plenty of pep.
Yep, all the guys my age watching the show will be going, see that? That's it. And when I'm in fourth gear and I don't have another, like, where's that number 5? No number 5. And I'll tell you what, this aluminum 427 feels pretty good.
Yes, sir.
Because I can tell underneath my foot that I'm barely on it. We're cruising in fourth gear. It's got tons of power to go.
Yeah, it's the type of gas pedal that if you're going to sneeze, take your foot off of the gas.
Phew!
Bless you.
Our temperature's running good. It has not moved at all. We got real good steady oil pressure. Fuel, it just says consuming. As fun as it is to build these cars, you know what we always say, it's more fun to get out and drive them. We don't tend to gravitate towards trailer queens.
Woo! Well, looks like Mang sneezed again.
I think that worked. After a long, hard day of burnouts and sunshine, we decided we'd shimmy up to Nashville and see if we could show the car off a little.
It's a beautiful car with the original hubcaps and everything. That's the touch right there, the original hubcaps. You know, most everybody put mags on them or whatever.
Actually got beat by a 69. I had a 72 Cutlass O's. Had the 350 Rocket in it. Muscle cars is better cars, stronger cars. These here go through a building.
Stick around and we'll see how well those skinny little tires can transfer all that power to the pavement.
Well, guys, before we call it a day, we got one more thing we want you to see.
So we swung by US 43 Dragway just to see what this old girl had in her. She did pretty well on our first run. We're looking at 854 in the 8th mile at 87.8 miles per hour. You may notice that she's pretty tricky coming out of the hole. Those bi-splies are being pushed to their limit for sure. We brought the air in the tires down from 34 pounds to 28. Mank jumped in for a run.
Lo and behold, my feel for it was a little hot for the first run, and I probably pushed it too hard, missing a shift.
You may remember back at the Shelby meet in Tulsa, I did the same thing in a GT 500.
And this is the face of someone who just missed second gear. Ha!
Now, I don't know if you guys got to see all that, and I sure hope you did, because that right there, that sound, boom, pow, that's what it sounds like when you miss second gear, too. Remember that? Remember what you said? I do.
One more try, and I'm finding that these tires still can't even begin to hang with the power this car is making under the hood. But at least we're having a good time.
Even with the track prep spray on the surface that we're running, it's still having traction issues. That goes to show that when you're on the street with a powerful car, be aware of where that skinny pedal's at.
Well, that was nice and straight.
There you go, guys. We took a plain Jane Camaro and kind of did our spin of a COPO Camaro. And I tell you one thing, this thing is definitely one cool ride.
Got her looking good again. It's performing beyond what we even expected. It's been a good day. What do you think?
Well, I hate to even head back to the shop, but I guess we probably ought to.
It usually takes like an hour to get back. I'm thinking 90 minutes maybe.
It is geared kind of like a tractor.
See you guys next time on POWERBLOCK.